All right, here we go. It's the Wednesday, April 27th edition of the Bottom Line Lexington podcast. Locally, there was a Pearl Jam concert here at Rupp Arena in Lexington last night. Me of 20 years ago, I would have been there. Me of 10 years ago, I probably would have been there. Me of today, I'm too old, and that's on a school night. I can't do that. I'm too old to go to Pearl Jam concerts in the middle of the week. Heck, I can't stay up past 10 o'clock very much these days. Not much sports-wise going on locally right now because we're in a college town. That's what Lexington is. But I was very intrigued by the Matthew Mitchell soap opera that's going on. If you know me and you know this show, I don't talk about women's college basketball ever. If you listen to yesterday's podcast, I explained in detail why women's college basketball is not something that makes for good sports talk radio. But this, now you're getting somewhere. You've got a coach who has lost 6 players, 3 coaches, and 2 recruits. That's 11 total people in the last year. And so he's going on another radio show here in town talking about Kentucky sports. And everybody knows what show I'm talking about. And I'm going to be honest, I despise listening to that show. It's so just over the top, self-serving, and totally homer. And you just don't get outside the state of Kentucky. Which there is actually a world outside of the state of Kentucky. I hate to tell you people that. But still, I was intrigued. So they said he was going to be on an interview on that show at 10:30. So you know what? I'm going to listen. I'm going to see what's going on with this guy. And the interviewer, who most of the time gives lousy interviews, butt-kissing interviews, afraid to ask real questions, actually asked some halfway decent questions because, well, he would have been killed in social media if he didn't exactly ask what was going on. So I'll give him, an average grade for the questions he asked. He still didn't ask truly hard-hitting questions. That's the thing about that show, that radio show that covers Kentucky sports. They can't give you the straight scoop and skinny because they have their hands in so many different pots. And I understand you have to protect your phony baloney job. You have to keep your money coming in. But that's why here on the Bottom Line, we tell it like it is. He's covering his butt. And that's what you have to do. When you're in that position, you can't ask the tough questions. You can't go out and actually say things for what they are. Because you have to play that public relations game just to protect your phony baloney job. So I get it. I don't knock a man's hustle. They got where they got from kissing butt. God bless them. Can't fault them. They did what they had to do to succeed. And they have. You have to give them credit. They have succeeded in this business. But in terms of asking hard-hitting questions, you don't usually get that a whole lot. So when Matthew Mitchell was asked today, what's going on, why are these people leaving, he said literally nothing. He gave you nothing. I listened to the whole 20-minute interview. He never addressed one player by name. He never addressed one coach by name. He just kept rambling on and on, saying that these 11 people that were leaving was a coincidence and that just things happen in life. It might happen with one person. It might happen with 3 people in a year. It doesn't happen with 11 people in a year. I'm sorry. This guy is totally covering up. And if you can't see that, then you don't get life. You don't get how people in high-ranking positions at these colleges and universities spin to keep their jobs and to keep the media away from what's really going on. I just have one question that needs to be answered. Why are these people leaving? If the coaches are leaving, are they going to better jobs or are they going to worse jobs? If the players are leaving, are they going to somewhere that makes them happier? Are they going because you won't play them? There's got to be a reason that 11 people have left that program in the last year and he won't say a word about any of them, players or coaches. I understand if you want to keep some private matters with a player to yourself, but that doesn't happen to 6 different players and 2 recruits. There's all kinds of chicanery going on behind the scenes at this school. He is obviously covering something up, covering quite a bit up if you ask me. The fact that he can't answer simple questions, it's almost to the point, you're either pregnant or you're not. Answer these questions yes or no. When you get this many people who want to leave, you've got to answer. You've got to answer the media. That's just the way it works. Bottom line here is this. You've got a coach of a team who obviously, and I said this yesterday, seems like he'd rather be doing anything else, like making music, than coaching basketball at certain points of the off season. And then you have 11 people leave the program. none of them giving any reason whatsoever, and then when you're asked about it, you don't have an answer? Yeah, there's some shady stuff going on at UK women's basketball. And until he actually answers some of these questions, he gets to keep going. Any athletic director worth their salt would have fired this guy in the last week or two. But with UK women's basketball, the beat goes on. Not much else going on around here locally. I saw where this Mac Jones, and his Twitter handle is @MacJones2017. So if you want to back up anything I'm about to say, go ahead and look at his timeline. He was in some rivals quarterback competition over the weekend, and he placed first place, and all of Big Blue Nation is going crazy. And literally now, people in the Big Blue Nation are begging him on Twitter not to go to another school. This is an actual tweet, and you can find this, like I said, @MacJones2017. I'm sure you're not going to, but please don't decommit. Big Blue Nation loves you. And this is a grown-ass man. We're not talking about some 8-year-old kid who's idol-worshiping somebody. This is a grown-ass man begging some 17-year-old kid not to decommit from UK football. That's amazing. Came out over the weekend that he now has an offer from Alabama. Be like that kid Damian Harris who went to Madison Southern. You'd be a fool not to go to Alabama if you got offers from Alabama and Kentucky. I don't care who you are. Alabama calls, you go. No matter what. I also saw on Twitter where he got an offer from Louisville too. And to be honest with you, where are you going to get better quarterback coaching? Louisville with Bobby Petrino or Kentucky with Mark Stoops? That's an easy answer. But the hysteria over recruiting has just gotten so ridiculous and out of hand. Some of you people should be embarrassed of yourselves, whether you're a UK fan or not. Just going on Twitter and talking to these kids and begging them not to decommit from UK? That is amazing to me. Do you people have jobs and lives? Bottom line is, following recruiting has become a huge industry. I know people that have websites, magazines, whatever, you name it, devoted to nothing but recruiting and have made a small fortune off the, what Rick Pitino used to call, the fellowship of the miserable. My thing is, on the radio, I talk about recruiting one day a year, National Recruiting Day. Other than that, it's the most miserable talk radio there is. But nothing I say is going to stop this recruiting hysteria anytime soon. It's something you have to deal with in life. Just watch from afar and watch how pathetic some people are trying to get their favorite players from high school to go to their favorite college or university. Interesting little conversation I had on Twitter yesterday with a fan, quote unquote. I don't think I'd call him a fan anymore. Somebody from a website was talking about the UK spring game about a week and a half ago, talking about a defensive back who could come up and tackle, being a difference maker, and saying that he didn't watch him in the spring game for that, or something like that. And then I was a little bit snarky to the reporter. What's the point of watching a defensive back in a spring game? You're literally wasting your time. And I believe that. I mean, you're wasting your time worrying about defensive backs who tackle in spring games. I mean, what more miserable Saturday afternoon can you spend? And then a man sees this about a week later and says that I'm a moron for saying so. And then we get into a little discussion about how important defensive backs are to football teams. And we looked at it from much different points of view. He looked at it as being a fan, worried about his favorite player, well, maybe not his favorite player, but a player, and what he thought was an important player on his favorite team. I looked at it, I'm trying to pick winners. I'm trying to figure out how many games is Kentucky going to win this year? 4, 5, certainly won't be 6. So I look at it as someone who's not trying to be a fan, certainly not a fan, someone who's just trying to predict how many games are going to win this year, nothing more. And so we got in the conversation of what's important to a football team. For me, in college football, what's important? Who's your coach, who's your quarterback? Those are the first two things I look at. Drew Barker is head and shoulders more important than anyone else on UK's football team combined. It's not even close. But my friend from Twitter tried to argue with me that defensive backs mean just as much. A good quarterback in college football can move lines 4, 5, sometimes over a touchdown if they're really good. A good defensive back doesn't change a betting line one bit out in Las Vegas. And I'll give you the perfect example. 2 years ago, Todd Gurley for the University of Georgia. Halfway through the season, He was the number one guy. He was the front runner for the Heisman Trophy. He was returning kicks for touchdowns. He was putting up 200 yards in some games. He was the leading rusher in America. Came out on a Monday afternoon. Here comes the line for the coming games this week. Georgia's a 3-point favorite at Missouri. Okay? Monday afternoon, Todd Gurley is announced with some other players on Georgia as potentially having violated NCAA rules by signing autographs. So Las Vegas immediately took that game off the board Monday afternoon. As the next few days progress, we find out that Todd Gurley will not be playing in the next game. He's the only one for Georgia that will miss the next game. So the line comes back out on Friday. You know what the line is? On Monday, before this Todd Gurley controversy, Georgia favored by 3. On Friday, after they figure out Todd Gurley will be missing that next game, the line, Georgia favored by 3. Nothing changed at all. And this was the front runner for the Heisman Trophy. Now, you take the quarterback away from Georgia for that game, I can promise you the point spread would have changed. That's how important the quarterbacks are and how irrelevant anybody other than the quarterback is. Todd Gurley missed that game. Georgia still won big, but still, in Las Vegas, even a guy who's the front runner for the Heisman Trophy, if he's not the quarterback, it's irrelevant. And you can go back, it's in 2014, you can go back and look at that. But all these people that focus on defensive backs that tackle, the 3-4 scheme versus the 4-3 scheme. Hey, who's the second team left guard on the offensive line depth chart? Hey, why don't we have a quarterback round table and tell us, hey, ex-quarterback from Kentucky, tell us what you see before snap. There is nothing more miserable in sports talk radio than talking about stuff like that. Nobody wants to hear it. Nobody. I literally listened last year, right after the first game of the season, when Kentucky played Lafayette. I swear to God, hand on a Bible, there was a former quarterback who was on a radio show in this town, a former UK quarterback, trying to convince me that UK should have scored 70 points. I'm not kidding. If you go back on everybody's favorite show, you can go back and listen to him try to argue that. And it just wasn't like one sentence or two. We're talking a couple of minutes he tried to argue that with me. We're talking a few minutes he tried to argue that with everybody in the state who was listening. That's flawed logic and homerism at its finest. You know what you talk about when you have a sports talk radio show and you want to talk about college football? Here's what you talk about. Talk about your coach, talk about your quarterback, talk about the line of the next game, talk about who's going to win the next game. That's it. That's the list. That's all you need to know. But of course, my friend on Twitter was trying to convince me that I was wrong, and the only reason that I could argue with him because I was good at Google searches and looking up statistics on the internet. Yeah, I'll take data over contrived cliches and conjecture any day of the week. I don't need somebody to come on the radio, oh, he's a big man, he's really strong, boy, look at him go after that ball. That is the most inane things to hear on the radio ever. Give me something I could use. Give me some statistical data, some historical data. Mark Stoops is 4-20 in SEC games. That's something I like to use a lot because he can't beat the big boys. So there's a lot of different ways to look at college football. I choose to look at it from an unbiased point of view. If you're a fan and you're worried about defensive backs who tackle, yeah, you look at it a lot differently than I do. Doesn't make you a bad person. Doesn't make me a bad person. We just look at it differently. And that's the bottom line. Speaking of Twitter, I keep seeing these autograph tours that these people go on. The Tyler Eulises, Jamal Murrays, all these former UK players. They go all around the state. And after their season's over, when they've declared for pro or they're a senior or whatever, they're going every little town in Kentucky and they're signing autographs and taking pictures. I don't know how much money they're making, but apparently, they've got to be making thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars off these crazy people who just want to take their kids to get them in a picture with them. And I don't knock a man's hustle. I'm not faulting the players. I'm not faulting any of these kids who are making money off these signatures. Do you really need autographs and pictures with these kids? When I see grown men, it's just like the recruiting thing. When I see middle-aged men just guffawing over these college kids who all they did was just watch them on TV 36 times this past winter or whatever, it amazes me. So I don't knock these kids for going on these autograph tours. I just question the sanity of people in this state who will just hero worship these players like they're Jesus' second coming. It's amazing to me. It's kind of like that Keeneland Maker's Mark bottle signing that I went to, I was forced to go to a couple of weeks ago. And I'll have another podcast later on this week devoted to nothing but that. Because the things I saw that night and that day, things I will never, ever forget because it was one of the most pathetic things I ever saw in my life. We'll discuss that later on. But the bottom line on this, I don't fault these kids, Tyler Eulis and Murray and those guys, for signing all these autographs and taking all these pictures. Because they are getting paid by crazy people. All right, let's get to some more sane topics. Reds lose again last night, 4-3 to the Mets in New York. They're up 3-0 going to the bottom of the seventh, and of course we know what that means. Bullpen time. Oh, wait, no. They left Brandon Finnegan in for the seventh inning. That's hard to believe. He had 94 pitches going into the bottom of the seventh, so let's see if we can sneak him through one more inning. First batter got out. Next batter walked. Next batter base hit. Now you've got 2 on, 1 out. Cespedes up for the Mets. Career 0 for 4 with 3 strikeouts against Finnegan. And you can see Terry Collins in the other dugout. Do I put Lucas Duda up? Finnegan's a left-hander. Duda is also a left-hander, but Cespedes is a righty. So what do I do here? Collins leaves his right-handed hitter in. Although he's been injured and missed the last couple of games, he leaves Cespedes in. Puts Duda back on the bench. Duda is no slouch himself. 57 home runs over the last 2 years. So he leaves Cespedes in. 106 pitches for Finnegan. Facing Cespedes, number 107, knocked out of the park. And you can see Bryan Price literally standing on the top step. What do? My bullpen is horrible. Should I go get Finnegan right now? If I bring in Cingrani, by the way, why don't you have a righty warming up at that time? You go get Cingrani, another lefty. It's not going to help you at all because you're still going to have to face Cespedes. Have a righty and a lefty warming up. That way you screw the Mets over in terms of going righty-lefty. So, of course, 3-run home run, game tied, Finnegan gets yanked. Here comes Cingrani, immediately giving up a triple to Curtis Granderson. And then David Wright, who coming into the game, 0 for 17 on the season with runners in scoring position. But he hadn't faced the Reds bullpen yet. So make that 1 for 18 now with runners in scoring position. Game-winning RBI for Wright. Game over. 4-3 Mets. Of course, they brought in Caleb Cotham, my choice for closer the rest of the year, in the 8th inning, and he had a clean inning. And of course, but the game was over by that point. Cotham, ERA now down to 1.54 easily, and the only effective Reds reliever at this point. By the way, how effective is Bryan Price's bullpen usage with Finnegan on the mound? That's the second time this year that Finnegan has been up 3-0 going into the 7th inning and still lost the game. Good job, Skipper. Want to predict the guy for the Reds who's headed for a fall? Zach Cozart. Oh, but what are you talking about? He's hitting .390 on the season. Well, his on-base percentage is .381. How do you pull that off? It seems impossible, doesn't it? Well, he's got 2 sacrifice flies and 1 walk on the year. 1 walk in 21 games. So he's going to probably walk on pace for about 6 times this year. You want that from your leadoff hitter? Wow. That will not get it done. And Zach Cozart is a career .240 hitter. He is headed for such a fall. It's called regression to the mean for you math experts out there. And I'm still on this Tucker Barnhart should be catching bandwagon. 2 more hits last night. .355 average in 34 at-bats this year. While Devin Mesoraco, the highly paid catcher, hitting .152 in 51 at-bats this year. Tucker Barnhart, on-base percentage 160 points higher. Why is this kid not playing more? I mean, neither one of these guys are exactly Johnny Bench. As I said on this podcast last week, Tucker Barnhart should be your everyday catcher. Reds finish up their 3-game tilt in New York City tonight. John Moscott in his 5.06 ERA will face Matt Harvey, who last year, World Series hero, 2.71 ERA, 1.02 whip, coming off Tommy John surgery the year before, 2013 All-Star Game starting pitcher. This year, 5.24 ERA. People are wondering, what's wrong with the Dark Knight? What's wrong with Matt Harvey? Well, Las Vegas doesn't think there's anything wrong with Matt Harvey. The Mets are about a -230, -240 right now. Can Moscott hold the Mets under 3 runs tonight through 6 innings? No way. Can't bet on the Reds tonight. Even though you're getting a lot of value with the Reds tonight, I still can't pull the trigger against Matt Harvey, even if he is in a slump. More little baseball news. Jake Arrieta, who actually no-hit the Reds last week. Some whispers about him using PEDs. And it's understandable. From 2010 to 2013 with Baltimore, 5.46 ERA. Gets traded to the Cubs. He's the best pitcher on earth. By the way, the Cubs traded Scott Feldman, who's now no longer with the Orioles, and Steve Clevenger, who in 3 years played 69 games for the Orioles. That's who the Orioles got in return for Jake Arrieta and the Cubs setup man, Pedro Strop. That's got to be the most lopsided baseball trade this century. Is Jake Arrieta on any kind of performance-enhancing drugs? Well, who knows? His career did turn around almost immediately after going to the Cubs. Bottom line, the only thing I think Jake Arrieta has tested positive for is Just for Men beard paint. Have you seen this guy's beard? If he's not painting or adding something to that beard to make it jet black, I'm not sitting here. And you're speaking to someone who, for a very short period of time and a very misguided period of time, used Just for Men on his goatee. Saw a little tidbit today. Edwin Encarnacion of the Blue Jays about to sign an extension that will probably last to the end of his career. By the way, Encarnacion, do you remember him from playing for the Reds a few years ago? 2009, Scott Rowland was traded from the Blue Jays to the Reds for Edwin Encarnacion. By the way, Scott Rowland has not played since 2012. Total home runs since the trade, Edwin Encarnacion 200 and counting, Scott Rowland 36, and that's it. There's another great Reds trade for you. Wouldn't Encarnacion look good at third base right now for the Reds? You darn right he would. Then you can put Suarez in left field because he's using an iron skillet for a glove. Some more Sam Bradford news today. We went over yesterday his statistics and how sad the early part of his career has been. More news yesterday that he was kept in the dark about the Eagles trading up to get that number 2 draft pick to get a quarterback. And then when it happened, he was pissed off about it. Now he's going to fight. Then he realized, well, maybe I don't have a chance. Now I want to trade. And then yesterday it comes out that he was offered to the Jets, and the Jets are like, meh, we don't need you. We've got Geno Smith and nobody else. But we don't need Sam Bradford. By the way, Geno Smith is worse than Sam Bradford. That's saying something. Then the Eagles offered him, of course, to San Francisco and Chip Kelly. The Eagles hate Chip Kelly. They're going to give him Sam Bradford. And even Bradford was like, nah, I don't want to go see Chip Kelly. Wow. You're begging to be traded. You're getting paid $18 million this year. And you don't want to go to San Francisco? This guy's self-delusion is incredible. NBA, Steve Kerr, Coach of the Year. Did he only coach like half of the year? How did that happen? More spin. Pathetic. Luke Walton should leave today. Toronto and the Hawks won last night, both up 3-2. I will predict right now, both those series will go the full 7 games. Blake Griffin out for the rest of the playoffs. It seems like the Clippers are just giving up. Chris Paul goes down. Blake Griffin's like, I'm checking out. I'm not going to get exposed. By the way, Portland at the Clippers tonight. Portland is a 3-point favorite. Who would have seen that coming a few days ago? The Clippers should lose that series, possibly in 6. Now it's going to be Blazers versus Warriors in the next round. Steph Curry got a huge break. Got time to heal for that Spurs Western Conference Final Series coming up down the line. Some other news, Ted Cruz campaigning in Indiana literally called a basketball rim a basketball ring. Wow, are you trying to lose in Indiana? You forget that Indiana is like one of the most basketball crazy places in the entire world? Dude, you have no shot at winning this election. Maybe you could bring in Bobby Knight, like Trump did. By the way, you'd have to pay him a lot of money. Bobby Knight does nothing for free. Those of you who have had to work with him or have had anything to do with Bobby Knight, he's all about the money. Don't think anything otherwise. That's why Trump got him and Cruz didn't. All right, Mac Daddy Stogie time. I like 2 games a lot tonight. Josh Tomlin for Cleveland, 1.54 ERA. Love him against Minnesota. But here's my real pick of the night. Houston as a plus 125, plus 130 dog. Colin McHugh, 7.56 ERA. What the heck is going on here? Well, who's Seattle got going on? Iwakuma's pitching for Seattle, 3.81. Is he really healthy? He had a contract with the Dodgers, but they turned him down because his arm's messed up. But yet he's pitching full-time again for the Mariners. Give me the younger, better team, the Houston Astros. Plus 130 tonight in Seattle. Your Mac Daddy Stogie of the night. You'll be smoking that cigar by the 9th inning. And that's it for the Wednesday, April 27th edition of the Bottom Line Lexington podcast. Thank you for listening. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at Bottom Line Lex. Follow us on Facebook, Bottom Line Lexington, and subscribe to this YouTube channel. That's it for now, and as always, may the winners be yours.